It's been a while since I last did any videos or anything, so I thought best do a video. And recently, a couple of days ago, I did this rendering as part of my next book, as I'm starting the process of going through. And quite a few people liked it, and quite a few people saw it. So I thought maybe this would be a good idea to just do a breakdown of this rendering, really. So as you can see, this is the Photoshop file. And I'm just going to go down layer by layer so you can just basically quickly see what it's made up of. And there's one immediately straight off the bat. There is one raster layer, and then there's 4 vector layers, and then there's a smart object, and then below all that there's a group, which I can't remember what's in that group. Oh, and in that group that is basically the original rendering. That's all the layers I did to do that. And what I then did, I duplicated the group. So I just right click, duplicate, and then what I did, I right clicked on that group and then I converted the group to a smart object. So if I double click on this smart object now, it will then open up in another file. Now, depending on how big this file is, depends on how quick it does it, but as you can see, this file now, it doesn't have a background or anything because the background is on. So that's the smart object, and then this is the one I did all the original stuff in. But as you can see, there's the background and the gradient is on this layer. Hence why on the smart object it's just transparent. But then within that group is all the original layers, and that might seem odd if you've never used smart objects before. But the reason why I convert it to a smart object, because I could just turn it off and just keep the original layers as they are there. But the reason why I do convert it to a smart object is here there's a depth of field to the actual rendering. So this right rear is all out of focus and the front left is out of focus, drawing your eye into the middle of the page. And as you can see, underneath there's a smart filter, which is basically, if you go to your filters when you're on this smart object, and you can adjust things. So if I double click on that blur gallery, you'll notice I've used an iris blur, and if I just turn that all the way down to 0, maybe recording this screen and doing this Photoshop file isn't the best idea. Let's just type a value in there, 0. So yeah, put that down to 0. You see suddenly this is in focus all of a sudden. All this is in focus, which obviously it looks fine, but to me there's a sense of realism that's added to all this. And the good thing about this is I could come back into this blur, which is an iris blur. You get a few choices. There's fill, blur, tilt, path, spin, blur. Now if you're doing if I quickly show you spin blur, just as an example, you can just literally pull this ellipse around. You can square off the ellipse. This is kind of the focus region, so that'll be the whole thing blurred. This would be blurred and then fade out basically. So this is kind of like your midpoint, and then this is how much you want it to be blurred. So if I'm doing a spin blur on here, you can kind of replicate what it's like blurring a set of wheels, for example, as they're spinning or rotating. So let's do that like that. Oh, sorry, it did think I was actually still doing the other one. So this is spinning based on the ellipse that you've created. So quite quickly you can create the effect of your wheels rotating. So then just click enter when you're happy. When you've positioned it and you're all good, you can click OK. Then that will do the blur. Then you'll notice it's all blurred, and I can turn that blur. Oh, come on, version. I can turn that blur off by clicking the little eye next to that, and you can also cancel that. You can also stack these on top of each other. So I can go up to filter, and for some reason let me do what I wanted to do. Okay, it's not playing ball. What mode am I in? Quick mask. Quick mask. Blur. Right, okay. So, like I said, you can stack these. So I could say, okay, I want to do the depth of field, which I usually use an iris blur for. And that will do that. As you do that, it will turn off the layers below as you preview it. So give that a second to render that smart layer. And the beauty of these smart layers is they're non-destructive. So as you can see, I can just turn it off and it's gone. So you don't have to worry about, oh, I've blurred it with the rasters and it's ruined it, it's not right, and what do we do now? Undo, command undo, control Z, what? You don't have to worry about that with these smart filters, but these only apply if it's a smart object. Hence why I flatten everything into a smart object. And so that gives you, but also it comes with a mask. So you can get a brush, and again, just like a normal mask, black or white, you could just kind of paint out where you want that blur to be removed. In this case, the body panel, because only the wheel is the one that's being blurred. So yeah, that's the reason why I use a smart object at the end of my renderings, and that's basically just to add depth of field. If I want to blur the wheels, I'll blur the wheels, and so forth. Or you could even pop that out. You can use it like that. You get the idea. So that's why I do the whole thing like that. However, let's get on. So let's ignore all that. I've got a few shapes up here. So if I get my direct selection tool or path selection tool, that's A on the keyboard. And let's just find, okay, so here you can see there's LEDs in the brake lights. Very, very small, but all it is, it's just a path. And because I've got my pen tool set to shape rather than an actual path, I can fill it or stroke it, and then as you can see in this case, the stroke isn't just a line, it's a series of dots. Hence why it's an easy, quick, easy way. 1, 2, load of dots, done. You don't have to physically paint 1, 2, 3, or do Control T and duplicate a million times. You can also do more options on any of these settings, and you can change the distance between and the size of the dot, and then with rounded corners or square mitered corners, etc. So that's really handy. So as you can see in that case, that wasn't as painstaking as it might look it was. And I've basically done 2 in there, and I've done 2 over there as well, but you probably can't even see them there due to the layer effects. Excuse me. And so that's basically those there. That's just a logo. It's been skewed. So now this is the whole rendering. Now I didn't render it in that order because I rendered it and I'd like move the wheels around whether they're on underneath or above something, so things do get moved around, but as I've seen before, I use groups quite a lot because it just kind of, everything that's one thing can just be put into the same place. Like those there are clearly the wheel, that's the hub, and when I look into there, there's a few raster layers, and then there's just a series of shape layers. And when I select that, it's just filled with a solid colour in that case. And then on top of that, I've painted with an airbrush just a bit of grey, and then I'll literally just command or control click on the layer, and I'll just invert that to then delete the outside of that raster layer. And then I've done another shape, set it to overlay, and it's just a fill of white, but because it's set to overlay, it picks up on the colour beneath it, and in this case that's orange. And then the only other layers really are inside the actual hub, and then a stroke ellipse. It's just got a 1 point. So that's the difference in that, because it's vector based. It's point. You can specify pixel if you want. Just type 1px, but that's all. That's literally all that is. So there's a few of those, and I added, just for creative license, just one random colour spoke. It's basically, as you can see, it's just a path. So if I want to move it, I can move it around. And I would encourage people to use vectors in the latest versions of Photoshop because it saves endless amounts of time. What used to take days now takes a few hours, because once you've done it, it's not set in stone. It's not raster based. It's not, if you don't like it, you have to redraw it, or you have to scale it or skew it, which then distorts it and ruins the resolution of it. With a vector, you can scale it endlessly, you can move it endlessly, you can change the thickness of the lines. So you can say, okay, I want that slightly thicker than the other ones. And that's it, it's done, that's all you have to do. You can put it back. So as you can see, you get a little square icon on the layer, and then that basically tells you that's a vector based layer, which is in Photoshop is called a shape layer. So that explains those. Then what is that layer there? So that layer is basically a highlight on the edge of that bodywork. Again, it's a vector, so if I feel like I want to move it around, I can move it around. Which is great for like when you send your rendering off, or you give it to your senior and they give you feedback and they say, oh, can you just change this, or change that edge, or change that blend. Rather than if it was raster based, I'd have to go in and I'd have to redraw or hack it around, mess about with it. But because it's a vector, like if someone said, oh, I don't like the size of that, I want it to be slightly thicker, or maybe I want it to cut in a bit more down here, I would literally just move that to where I want it to be. Same with all the base layers, and I wouldn't have to redraw it. So it's effortless in a way. And in that sense, it saves you an awful lot of time in industry. Like, we'll literally have a few hours to do a rendering rather than days doing product design. If I was in car design, it may differ. I don't work in the car industry, so they might spend days on something. Where at work, I generally get about 3-4 hours to produce a rendering, sometimes less than that. So you just have to be as quick as you can, and you just need to produce the best you can as quickly as possible. And like here you can see just a simple black and white render of what would be a diffuser, some kind of exhaust, not necessarily combustion, but then there's kind of a wheel hub and there's a bit of suspension on that side. But then I literally just got one layer on top, and it's just an image of some carbon fibre. Set it on overlay and reduce the opacity. You can play around with that depending on what effect you want to go with. And then all I've done, like if I just remove that mask, you can see there it's literally just an image grabbed off Google. And then I just painted with the mask around here. So again, using layer masks, it's non-destructive, so that image is always there. So if I need to reuse other parts of it, I can just copy and paste that layer or something, or repaint the mask. So it saves you a lot of time. Whereas if I did it the old way and I'd use the eraser and I'd erased it, you'd be annoyed if you come back to it and you think, oh, I've got to change that. I need to get that image again, or redo it all together. Whereas use the layer mask, just repaint it, done. So at this point, I've got all those done. Started to do all the diffuse area. And you'll notice that as I flick through these layers, the process generally repeats itself, like part lines are a good example. Again, they're all vector based. So if I think that bezel or that radius or that surface fillet, depending on what you're used to terminology wise, if I want it to be a little bit bigger and if it's probably a bit small, I can literally just select that layer, which I think is one of these. I've just gone over it. Yeah, that one. So I literally, again, same thing, press A and I can just scale it up. And I can just change the size of it. Dead easy. Job done in a few seconds. So there's no need to like do it the old way. Get the pen tool, make a path, go to the path panel, stroke it. It's raster based. If it's not quite right, I have to do it again. And then the thing with that is I used to end up with loads of layers in here in the paths panel. And it would literally, I'd overwrite paths without even realising it, and you'd find that you'd spent an hour doing a load of paths, and because you'd done something wrong, you just lose all your paths because you hadn't done a new path layer. And it did get ridiculous, and it was so time consuming. Whereas now, it's all just there. You don't have to worry about it. Once it's done, it's done. And then also with the paths, as you'll see with this one, you'll notice it's not an actual solid, harsh, edged line. It looks like it's been done with an airbrush. And it's basically, all it is a 2 pixel grey. Sorry. And I've just gone into the properties panel, so you can get that from window and then go to properties. And I docked mine in the layers because these are the two that I always use. For some reason, I've never got rid of paths. It's always there by default. And I've literally just added a feather. So if I remove that feather, again, this is non-destructive editing. I can just change that to whatever I want it to be. And the more you feather it, the more it will just fade out. And you'll notice the difference as I do that, where the pixels actually go. And again, as you can see from that, it's literally just 1, 2, 3, 4 points, and then pulled them apart, and that's it really. And I'm not going to go for every single layer because it's so repetitive. I'm probably making rendering sound really boring, but I mean, if you like doing it traditionally, in the sense that you'd paint it and you'd use erasers, and you can do that by all means. But if you want to be efficient and you've got deadlines to meet and you've got to get it done quickly, this is such a methodical way of doing it, and it's such an efficient way of doing it, and it's not such an artistic way of doing it. And there's nothing wrong with doing it the other way. If you want to do it the other way, it's fine. I don't blame you. But you kind of get into a routine. Like at work, I just get into a routine where I just need to get stuff done, and I need to get it done quick. But at the same time, I need to keep the quality up. So you find more efficient ways that you can get more done. That's basically why I work this way. Now you notice now with the text layer, it just says IR grip. Just something I made up just so it looks like it's a set of branded wheels or tyres. And it's actually an ellipse. So I've gone down to the shape panel and I've selected ellipse. And I've just created an ellipse like that. And not quite sure where that's actually done that. Sorry, it's just done pixels for some reason. So if I did like a new ellipse, and just for the purpose so you can see this, I'll fill it black. Cancel it. So that's created a new shape layer. Now how I achieved this, where the text follows, as you can see on this text layer, there's a path, and that text follows that path. So you grab you grab your shape layer, and then press T on the keyboard, or use the text tool, or use shortcuts. And you notice as you drag the icon closer to that edge, the icon changes. So if you click there, suddenly you can just start typing, and it'll follow whatever that is. And then you can also use your character settings, and again you can change the size of it, you can change the font, you can change the spacing, you can change the height and width, make it whatever. But again, it means that you can write text like I have there. Let me just get rid of that. Like I have there, you can write the text just there. And also, it's a bit fiddly, but if you double click, you should get this little eye symbol with like 2 arrows over the side of it, and you should just be able to reposition by dragging that around. And you can also bring it to the other side of the actual line. It's a bit fiddly. I think that it'd be better if they made this a bit more obvious as to how you go about doing that and using that tool, but as it is, it seems to work with a bit of getting used to. Excuse me. So it's a really good way of just writing text on anything that's got to go around a shape or around a curve or anything like that, which is really beneficial, because the traditional way of doing it, you do a load of text, whatever it's going to be, and then you just free transform it. So edit, free transform, and then you wouldn't be able to do anything really apart from skew, because it's still based as a vector, as a text layer. So you then have to rasterize the type, so it just becomes pixels. And then you'd have to either use any of these tools, so you could use like warp, and then you could kind of do an arch, and you'd try and bend it and try and fit it, and then you'd be scaling it and so forth. But it's never going to achieve the consistency like that does. And this way also, well, as you can see, it takes you longer to do it. So it's just not worth doing it. So that is one good benefit of using the vectors. Let's find something interesting that's within here. So I've got some noise. Basically all I've done is I've painted with an airbrush. Do a new layer. When I say airbrush, it's actually just a normal brush. I don't do any, like, someone asked me in a recent video about using brushes, and to be honest, I never use any of these brushes. As you can see, they're just default. And all I ever use is this one brush, and I literally do size or hardness, and that's it. It'd be nice to actually use some of these blurred and imitation brushes and stuff that it kind of replicates, but I just don't have the time to do that sort of stuff, because I would quite happily sit there messing around with the brush settings for about half an hour, and when I've got 3 renderings to do in one day, I literally don't have time to do that. So to answer that person's question, it was from quite a while ago, you'll know who you are. I literally just use the one brush, and then I'll just change the opacity of the brush and then the flow of the brush. But yeah, to get back to this noise, anyway, I'll show you how you do it. I could do on a clean raster layer, I just paint roughly where I want the noise or the fleck in the paintwork to be, and then I'll literally go to filter and I'll just add noise, and then it does that, and it kind of looks like the noise you get on a TV screen from back in the day. And then I'll literally just set that to overlay, and then as you can see, it's a bit garish at the minute, so you just tone it down and just play around with the levels of that, and then suddenly it looks like you've got a bit of metal flake in the paint. Like, obviously you zoom in, you can just see it's grey and white pixels, but from a distance does the trick. If you really wanted to, you could keep it full. Say if you're doing something that's brushed metal, you could literally just, once you've done the noise, you could then go into a blur gallery or a blur. And in this case, I'll do a motion blur. And this is an easy way of getting brushed metal. And then you can just rotate it. But this is raster based as well. So once I've done this, that's it then. I can't do anything about it. It's set in stone. If I don't like it, I have to undo, provided I haven't gone past the undo limit. Or I have to redo it. If you were to do it with a vector, so just do like that for now, and I'll just fill that with the same grey, and then all I'll do is I'll convert that to a smart object. So you notice the icon changes. That means I can open that file. It opens the vector, so I can edit the vector. Just save, and then go back to your layer, and you'll notice it's moved. So you can always go back and edit it if you want to. But then, as I did before with the other layers, I can just go to noise, add noise, and then it'll add whatever the amount I set it to. You can change it from being monochrome or not. So in this case, you can get all the colours in if you really want. You can get uniform or Gaussian or whatever. Play around with that. And then on top of that, I can do filter, I can do blur, motion blur. And then you can play around the speed of that. And voila. But this time, because it's done on a smart object, I can just turn them off. And I've still got that original layer, which I can come in here and I can edit, just do a save. And then there we are. And then as you put those layers back on, they appear like that. So that's one of the many benefits as well. If your boss says, oh, I don't like the brush metal, just get rid of the brush metal, just make it chrome. And you think, oh, I've rendered that, I've got to do it again. You just turn them off. And then you could even go into this layer and you could say, okay, I'm going to add a gradient. And you can just quickly, as easy as that, cancel that. I want to move that one. So then you can go quick chrome, as if you do like a chrome pipe. It's the contrast between dark and light, and that's it basically. Unless it's obviously reflecting something within a scene. Then you could save that again. You could play around with that. You get the idea. But suddenly it's there, and then you can play around the settings. Well, but it just means it's so much easier and quicker to use, which is one of the many benefits of that. So moving on from that, again, just a repeat of all the different layers. So here, just more part lines. You can see them flashing on and off. Here, there's a kind of a shadow cast on the windscreen, and it's just a layer with a gradient, which goes. If I open that gradient, you can better see. The top two ones are your transparency, so it gives you an opacity. So the left side, the black one is 100%, the white one is 0, as you can see there. And then these are just the colours below, and as you can see, it just fades out. In this case, I've used the same colour. I mean, I could change that to like a red or whatever. But yeah, you get the idea. So that's basically, and it's just going in this direction. And then I've just added, did I even add a feather to that? I don't think I even added a feather to that. No, I literally just use a layer mask. So I just used an airbrush and just brushed out some areas to just soften it off a bit. But it kind of gives because there's a harsh line there, it gives the impression of a reflection. And things like all the white spots. Okay, target channels hidden. Okay, so these ones I've just done a couple of layers just to represent the interior lining to the window, and then just the black masking on the glass where the glass joins the body panels. Just a few layers, then more part lines, more part lines. There's quite a lot of just part lines. I think probably from here upwards is probably just part lines. And the odd bit of shading, so down here it looks really soft and organic, as in it was done with an airbrush, but it's actually just a solid shape with a solid fill. And then it's slightly feathered, and then I've just masked off this edge here to soften it off. But again, like, the beauty of this is I can just bring it up, I can move it around, I can tweak that, I can change the intensity of that. And then there's a white layer here. So here I've got a white layer where I literally just used an airbrush, and it's just basically, I just did it on top of this just to knock out that area there, that edge. So later on, when you see the depth of field on it, you just see a kind of a disappearing of the car. So it just kind of helps with the blurring of the edges of the focus. So here I've got springs and so forth. So within here there's quite a few stuff actually. I've got this layer. Where are you? Okay, so there's one layer there for that, and then there's a layer over here for that one. Basically, I did that one, I copied and pasted it, and then I just adjusted the points to fit with the perspective. Simple as that. And there's just some raster layers of just painting some grey and a bit of white. So there's a grey with white on it on one layer, and then same on this side, and then just an airbrush of white so it's soft. Then the contrast of, let's find that layer. I don't know how it keeps telling me it's hidden, but it's clearly not. The springs, you can see here, just two layers, just airbrushed, just a few strokes, and then one of them is a colour dodge on top of the normal layer. So the normal layer is just an orange, and then the same orange, just colour dodge, just picks up on the highlight of something being reflected on that edge, and that's literally it. And then yeah, just literally I've just done where the light would hit it and left all that just pitch black, but it kind of gives the impression of the depth. What else we got? I got a duplicate of the spokes I did for the rear. I just duplicated them, and because they were all vectored in the first place, it's not too bad. When you scale it down, it doesn't get like depixelated or blurred. And I've done one layer here, which I'll show you, which you've got just a gradient fill, and then on top of that I've got clipping masks, which basically is I've painted on the highlights around the what is it doing? So that one layer apparently is the whole thing. Right, okay, now it wants to play ball. Yeah, so that one layer is, if I remove that clipping mask, release, where's my release? Release clipping mask. I think it's meant quick mask mode, that's why. Right, release clipping mask. And you can see I just painted roughly, and it's gone without the bounds of the spokes itself, but because I just created a clipping mask, it then only allows pixels to be seen based on the layer below. So if I just command on that, you can see that's the area that it allows pixels to be seen. And that's what the good thing about these are. And then also, if you wanted to move these around, you can see how they move around. That's literally all it is. Just a few airbrush layers, and I'll just set them to a clipping mask. So you literally, once you're happy with it, and you can stack these as long as you want, and just create a clipping mask. That's all I did for those. What layer is that? That's the main layer. So that's the layer that I copied basically, just duplicated. And all I've done a layer mask where the body panel overlaps the tire. And then using the layer mask, I've kind of faded out this area here as well. And again, I've got one layer. Oops. And then these layers here are just within that clipping mask. So I can move them around, and you can see them moving within the pixels of shape 43, which is that layer there. That's it. Easy as that. So there's very few layers to that wheel. So if I turn that wheel off, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 layers. And similar sort of layers for that. And yeah, it's just repeated really, so there's no point going over everything. I'll show you the highlights and the white spots. Where are they going to be? Let's just find. Okay, so all these generally, you'll notice like I do all the dark areas together and all the light areas together. So there's one path there that goes all the way around the edge, and it just shows the edge of the thickness of the material. And then this layer here is basically, there's two layers to this. One, it's got a harsh edge, and then the one below or on top, it doesn't really make much difference, is the one that's got the feathered mask. So that I generally add a little bit of space in between the two. So I'll generally duplicate the bottom one, and then the top one I'll just move it in a bit, so it gives it kind of a little bit of space to kind of feather out, but you retain this harsh edge. It kind of gives the impression of like a photo studio where it's been lit by a lamp in the scene. And yeah, and that's one layer set to a feather of whatever, and then the layer on top is just harsh. There's no feather. And yeah, again, it's, if I kind of want to change the form or something, you could just drag them around, and just that simple highlight suggests that soft round top. And that's basically how all the highlights are done, all made up of two layers. So there's, again here, there's a soft airbrush. Well, it appears to be airbrush. I keep saying that. I don't know why I say that. It's feathered vector mask, and then another one. It's exactly the same, probably slightly smaller, and it's just kept really harsh. And that's basically it, really. And the process repeats itself. Even the underside of that shadow is just a grey, and it's just set to normal 100% opacity, and I just account for the little radiuses. Then there's a stroke, which is basically a highlight on that radius, and then a shadow. Again, the shadow, if my boss was to say, that's not quite right, let's change it, I can just change it. Don't have to redraw it, don't have to re-render it, don't have to erase it, don't have to do anything. Just drag that around, job done. So yeah, from my experience, it's all about efficiency, but you've still got to keep that creative license. Sorry. And that's it really. Just to show you the bottom layer, I've got a gradient, which basically is a grey and then it just fades out to white. And that's basically the floor, and then the top area is that way. Then I've got a black layer, which is basically the shadow. And as you can see, as I remove that, you can just see what's been drawn there really. And then I've got just some diffuser detail down there. Then I've got the wheels underneath the bodywork. Then I've got the brake lights underneath the bodywork because of how the body overhangs those. And then this one's you can see the path for the whole body. It just goes all the way around. It kind of overlaps here, but that doesn't really matter because you don't see that bit there. So then I used that shape, so I just command clicked on there, then applied a layer mask, and then just drew with a black brush, and then it just erased that area there, so I didn't have to worry about that overlap there because I just used the layer mask to get rid of it. And then that's it. So the base colour effectively is just one layer, and again that layer is just a gradient. It just goes from a dark grey to a light grey, and it just kind of goes from the bottom up, so dark down here, light up here. And that's about it really. Again here two layers look, so there's one with a large feather, and then the next one is just really harsh and slightly smaller, so you get that harsh edge with that kind of glow effect. And that's it. So that is the breakdown of this rendering, and I'll just leave you with that.